Your life. Let us drink water. Part 14, Failure and Success. It oftentimes requires heroic courage to face fruitless effort, to take up the broken strands of a life work, to look bravely towards the future, and proceed undaunted on our way. But what, to our eyes, may seem hopeless failure is often but the drawing of a greater success. Pardon me, it is dawning of a greater success. It may contain in its debris the foundational material of a mighty purpose, or the revelation of a new, pardon me, of new and higher possibilities. Some years ago, it was proposed to send logs from Canada to New York by a new method. The ingenious plan of Mr. Joggins was to bind great logs together by cables and iron girders and to tow the cargo as a raft. When the novel craft near New York and success seemed assured, a terrible storm arose. In the fury of the tempest, the iron bands snapped like icicles, and the angry water scattered the log far and wide. The chief of the hydrographic department of what? Pardon me. The chief of the hydrographic department at Washington heard of the failure of the experiment, and at once sent word to shipmasters the world over, urging them to watch carefully for these logs which he described, and to note the precise location of each in latitude and longitude, and the time the observation was made. Hundreds of captains sailing over the waters of the earth noted the logs in the Atlantic Ocean, in the Mediterranean, in the South Seas, for into all waters did these venturesome ones travel. Hundreds of reports were made, covering a period of weeks and months. These observations were then carefully collated, systematized, and tabulated, and discoveries were made as to the course of ocean currents that otherwise would have been impossible. The loss of the Joggins raft was not a real failure, for it led to one of the great discoveries in modern marine geography and navigation. In our superior knowledge, we are disposed to speak in a patronizing tone of the follies of the alchemists of old. But their failure to transmute the baser materials into gold resulted in the birth of chemistry. They did not succeed in what they attempted, but they brought into vogue the natural processes, the natural process of sublimation, filtration, distillation, and crystallization. They invented the alembic, the retort, the sandbag, the water bath, and other valuable instruments. To them is due the discovery of antimony, sulfuric ether, and phosphorus, the cupellation of gold and silver, the determining of the properties and saltpeter and its use in gunpowder, and the discovery of the distillation of essential oils. This was the success or failure. a wondrous process of nature for the highest growth, a mighty lesson of comfort, strength, and encouragement. If man would only realize and accept it. Many of our failures sweep us to a greater, pardon me, sweep us to greater heights of success than we ever hoped for our, pardon me again, for that we ever hoped for in our wildest dreams. Life is a successive unfolding of success from failure. In discovering America, Columbus failed absolutely. His ingenious reasoning and experiment led him to believe that by sailing westward, he would reach India. Every red man in America carries his name, carries in his name India. The perpetuation of the memory of the failure of Columbus. The Genoese navigator did not reach India. The cargo of souvenirs he took back to Spain to show to Ferdinand and Isabella as proofs of his success really attested his failure. But the discovery of America was a greater success than was any finding of a back door to India. When David Livingstone had supplemented the theological education by a medical course, he was ready to enter the missionary field. For over 3 years, he studied tirelessly, with all energies concentrated on one aim to spread the gospel in China. The hour came when he was ready to start out with noble enthusiasm for his chosen work, to consecrate himself and his life of his unselfish ambition. The word came from China that the Opium War would make it folly to attempt to enter the country. Disappointment and failure did not long daunt him. He offered himself as missionary to Africa, and he was accepted. His glorious failure to reach China opened a whole continent to light and truth. His study proved an ideal preparation for his labors as physician, explorer, teacher, and evangel in the wilds of Africa. Business reverses, and the failure of his partner threw upon the broad shoulders and the still broader honor and honesty of Sir Walter Scott a burden of responsibility that forced him to write. The failure spurred to experiment. The failure spurred him to almost superhuman effort. The masterpieces of Scott's historic fiction that have thrilled, entertained, and uplifted millions of his fellow men in a glorious monument on the field of a seeming failure. When Millet, the Pengrove Angelus, worked on his almost divine canvas, in which the very air seems wait, in which the very air seems pulsing with the regenerating essence of spiritual reverence. He was paying his time. He was antidoting sorrow. He was racing against death. His brushstrokes put on in his pardon me, put on in the early morning hours before going to his menial duties as a rail reporter. In the dusk like that perpetuated on his canvas, meant strength, food, and medicine for the dying wife he adored. The art failure that cast him into the depths of poverty, unified with marvelous intensity all the finer elements of his nature. This rare spiritual unity, this purging of all the dross of triviality, as he passed through the furnace of poverty, trial, and sorrow, gave eloquence to his brush and enabled him to paint as never before, as no prosperity would have been made possible. Failure is often the turning point, the pivot of circumstance that swings us to higher levels. It may not be financial success, it may not be fame, it may be new drafts of spiritual, moral, or mental inspiration that will change us for all the later years of our life. Life is not really what comes to us, but what we get from it. Whether man has a wealth or poverty, failure or success, counts for little when it is past. There is but one question for him to answer, to face boldly and honestly as an individual alone with his conscience and his destiny. How will I let poverty or wealth affect me? If that trial or deprivation has left me better, truer, nobler, then poverty has been riches, failure has been a success. If wealth has come to me and has made me vain, arrogant, contemptuous, uncharitable, cynical, closing from me all the tenderness of life, all the channels of higher development, of possible good to my fellow man, make me the mere custodian of a money bag, then wealth has lied to me. It's been failure, not success. It has not been riches, it's been dark, treacherous poverty that stole from me even myself. All things becomes for our enemy. All things become for us than what we take from them. Failure is one of the God's educators. It is experience leading man to higher things. It is the revelation of a way, a path hitherto unknown to us. The best men in the world, those who made the greatest real success, look back with serene happiness on their failures. The turning of the face of time shows all things in a wondrously illuminated and satisfying perspective. Many a man is thankful today that some petty success for which he once struggled melted into thin air as his hand sought to clutch it. Failure is often the rock bottom foundation of real success. If man, in a few instances of life, can say those failures were the best thing in the world that could have happened to me, should he not face new failures with undaunted courage and trust that the miraculous ministry of nature may transform these new stumbling blocks into new stepping stones? Our highest hopes are often destroyed to prepare us for better things. The failure of the caterpillar is the birth of the butterfly. The passing of the bird is the becoming of the rose. The death or destruction of the seed is the prelude to its resurrection as wheat. It is at night, in the darkest hours, those preceding dawn, that plants grow best, that they most increase in size. May this not be one of the nature's generous showings to man of the times when he grows best, of the darkness of failure that is evolving into the sunlight of success. Let us Fear only the failure of not living the right as we see it, leaving the results to the guardianship of the infinite. If we think of any supreme moment of our life, any great success, anyone who is dear to us, and then consider how we reach that moment, that success, that friend, we will be surprised and strengthened by the revelation. As we trace each one back, step by step, through the genealogy of circumstances, we will see how logical has been the course of our joy and success, from sorrow and failure. And that what gives us most happiness today is inextricably connected with what once caused us sorrow. Many of the rivers of our greatest prosperity and growth have had their source and their trickling increase into volume among the dark, gloomy recesses of our failure. There is no honest and true walk, carried along with constant and sincere purpose that purpose that ever really fails. If it sometimes seems to be wasted effort, it will prove to us a new lesson of how to walk. The secret of our failures will prove to us the inspiration of possible successes. Man living with the highest aims, ever as best he can, in continuous harmony with them, is a success, no matter what statistics of a failure in a near-sighted and half-blind world of critics and commentators may lay its door. High ideals, noble efforts will make seeming failures but trifles. They need not dishearten us. They should prove sources of new strength. The rocky way may prove safer than the slippery path of smoothness. Birds cannot fly best with the wind but against it. Ships do not progress in calm when the sails flap idly against the unstrained masts. The alchemy of nature, superior to that of Paracelsians, Paracelsians, Paracelsians. The alchemy of nature, superior to the Paracelsians, constantly transmutes the baser metals of failure into the later pure gold of higher success. If the mind of the worker be kept true, constant and untiring in his service, and he have that sublime courage that defies fate to its worst while he does his best. Chapter 15, I must stop it here and refill my water bottle. Okay, wait 1 minute. I will be right here. Just have 1 minute. Okay, number 15. This is the second last chapter from this book. Do our best at all times. This is the chapter name. Do our best at all times. Life is a wondrously complex problem for the individual until someday, in a moment of illumination, he awakens to the great realization that he can make it simple. Never quite simple, but always simpler. There's a Helen. There are 1,000 mysteries of right and wrong that have baffled the wise men of the ages. There are depths in the great fundamental question of the human race that no plummet of philosophy has ever sounded. There are wild cries of honest hunger for truth that seek to pierce the silence beyond the grave. But to them ever echo back only repetition, pardon, only repetition of their unanswered cries. To us all comes at times the great note of questioning despair that darkens our horizon and paralyzes our effort. If there really be a God, if eternal justice really rule the world, we say, why should life be as it is? Why do some men starve while others feast? Why does virtue often languish in the shadow while vice trumps in the sunshine? Why does failure so often jog the footsteps of honest effort? While the success that comes from trickery and dishonor is greeted with the world's applause, how is it that the loving father of one family is taken by death, while the worthless encumbrance of another is spared? Why is there so much unnecessary pain, sorrowing, and suffering in the world? Why indeed should there be any? Neither philosophy nor religion can give any final satisfactory answer that is capable of logical demonstration. Okay, I have to, I have gotten a curiosity to learn about philosophy. What is philosophy? What is religion? What is philosophy? What are philosophers? I'll read after it. I will read that chat after this reading, okay, of absolute proof. There is ever, even after the best explanation, a residuum of the unexplained. We must then fall back in the eternal arms of faith and be wise enough to say, I will not be disconcerted by these problems of life. I will not permit them to plunge me into doubt and to cloud my life with vagueness and uncertainty. Man arrogates much to himself when he demands from the infinite the full solution of all his mysteries. I will found my life on the unimpenetrable rock of a simple fundamental truth. This glorious creation, with its millions of wondrous phenomena, pulsing ever in harmony with the eternal law, must have a creator. That creator must be omniscient and omnipotent. But that creator himself cannot, in justice, demand of any creature more than the best that that individual can give. I'll do each day, in every moment, the best I can by the light I have. I will ever seek more light, more perfect illumination of truth, and ever live as best I can in harmony with the truth as I see it. If failure come, I'll meet it bravely. If my pathway then lie in the shadow of trial, sorrow, and suffering, I shall have the restful peace and the calm strength of one who has done his best, who can look back upon the past with no pang of regret, and who has heroic courage of facing the results, whatever they be, knowing that he could not make them different. Upon this life plan, this foundation, man may erect any superstructure of religion, any superstructure of religion or philosophy that he conscientiously can erect. He should add to his equipment for living every shred of strength and inspiration moral, mental, or spiritual that is in his power to secure. The simple working faith, as opposed to no creed, is a substitute for none. It is but a primary belief, a citadel, a refuge where the individual can retire for strength when the battle for life grows hard. A mere theory of life that remains but a theory is about as will is about as useful to a man as a gilt-edged menu is to a starving sailor on a raft in mid-ocean. It is irritating but not stimulating. No rule for higher living will help a man in the slightest until he reach out and appropriate it for himself. Until he make it practical in his daily life. Until that seed of theory in his mind blossom into 1,000 flowers of thought and word and act. If a man honestly seek to live his best at all times, that determination is visible in every moment of his living, and no trifle in his life can be too insignificant to reflect his principle of living. The sun illuminates and beautifies a fell-on leaf by the roadside as impartially as a towering mountain peak in the Alps. Every drop of water in the ocean is an epitome of the chemistry of the whole ocean. Every drop is subject to precisely the same laws as dominate the united infinity of billions of drops that make the miracle of nature. Men call the sea. No matter how humble the calling of the individual, how uninteresting and dull the round of his duties, he should do his best. He should dignify what he's doing by the mind he puts into it. He should vitalize what little he has of power or energy or ability or opportunity in order to prepare himself to be equal to higher privileges when they come. This will never lead a man to that weak content that is satisfied and whatever falls to his lot. It will rather fill his mind with that divine discontent that cheerfully accepts the best merely as a temporary substitute for something better. The man who is seeking ever to do his best is the man who is keen, active, wide awake, and aggressive. He is ever watchful of himself in trifles. His standard is not what will the world say, but is it worthy of me? What does that mean? Is it worthy of me? The phrase worthy of me means deserving of one's respect, attention, or standard. Okay, does it deserve me? What does this mean? Edwin Booth, one of the greatest actors on the American stage, would never permit himself to assume an ungraceful attitude, even in his hours of privacy. In this simple thing, he ever lived his best. On the stage, every move was one of the unconscious grace. Those of his company who were conscious of their emotions were the awkward ones, who were seeking in public to undo or to conceal the carelessness of the gestures and emotions of their private life. The man who is slipshod and thoughtless in his daily speech, whose vocabulary is a collection of anemic commonplaces, whose repetitions of phrases and extravagance of interjections, act but as feeble disguises of his lack of ideas, will never be brilliant of an occasion when he longs to outshine his tears. Living at one's best is constant preparation for instant use. It can never make one over-precise, self-conscious, affected, or priggish. Education, in its highest sense, is conscious training of mind or body to act unconsciously. It is conscious formation of mental habits, not mere acquisition of information. One of the many ways in which the individual unwisely eclipses himself is in his worship of the fetish of luck. He feels that all others are lucky and that whatever he attempts fails. He does not realize the untiring energy, the unremitting concentration, the heroic courage, the sublime patience that is the secret of some man's success. Their luck was that they had prepared themselves to be equal to their opportunity when it came and were awake to recognize it and receive it. His own opportunity came and departed unnoted. It could not waken him from his dreams of some untold wealth that would fall into his lap. So he grows discouraged and envies those whom he should emulate. And he benches his arms and chloroforms his energies and performs his duties in a perfunctory way. Or he passes through life just ever sampling lines of activity. The honest, faithful struggler should always realize that failure is but an episode in a true man's life, never the whole story. It is never easy to meet, or no philosophy can make it so, but the steadiest courage to master conditions, instead of complaining of them, will help him on his way. It will ever enable him to get the best out of what he has. He never knows the long series of vanquished failures that give solidity to someone else's success. He does not realize the price that some rich man, the innocent footballer, political malcontents, and demagogues has heroically paid for wealth and position. The man who has a pessimist's doubt of all things, who demands a certified guarantee of his future, whoever fears his work will not be recognized or appreciated, or that, after all, it is really not worthwhile, will never live his best. He is dulling his capacity for real progress by hypnotic cars of excuses for inactivity, instead of a strong tonic of reasons for action. One of the most weakening elements in the individual makeup is the surrender to the oncoming of years. Man's self-confidence dims and dies in the fear of age. This new thought, he says of some suggestion tending to higher development, is good. It is what we need. I am glad to have it for my children. I've been happy to have had something now when I was at school. But it is too late for me. I'm a man advanced in years. This is but blind closing of life to wondrous possibilities. The knell of lost opportunity is never told in his life. It is never too late to recognize truth and to live by it. It requires only greater effort, closer attention, deeper consideration. But the impossible does not exist for the man who is self confident and is willing to pay the price in time and struggle for his success and development. Later in life, the assessments are heavier in progress, as in life insurance. But that matters not to that mighty self confidence that will not grow old while knowledge can keep it young. Socrates, when his hair whitened with the snow of age, learned to play on instruments of music. Cato, at fourscore, began his study of Greek, and the same age saw Coleridge beginning, with the enthusiasm of a boy, his first lessons in Latin. The character of man, Theophrastus, great as was begun on his 19th birthday. Chaucer's Canterbury Tales was the work of the poet's declining years. Ronsard, the father of French poetry, whose sonnets our translation cannot destroy, even translation can destroy, did not develop his poetic faculty until nearly 50. Benjamin Franklin, at his age, had just taken his really first steps of importance in philosophic pursuits. Arnauld, the theologian and sage, translated Josephus in his 18th year. Winckelmann, one of the most famous writers on classic antiquities, was the son of a shoemaker, and lived in obscurity and ignorance until the prime of his life. Hobbes, the English philosopher, published his version of the Odyssey in his 87th year and his Iliad 1 year later. Chevron, the great French scientist whose untiring labors in the realm of color have so enriched the world, was busy, keen, and active when death called him at the age of 103. These men did not fear age. These few names from the great master roll, the famous ones, who defied the ears, should be voices of hope and heartening to every individual whose courage and confidence is weak. The path of truth, higher living, truer development in every phase of life, is never shut from the individual until he closes it himself. Let man feel this, believe it, make this faith a real, living factor in his life. And there are no limits to his progress. He has but to live his best at all times, and rest calm and untroubled, no matter what results come to his efforts. The constant looking backward to what might have been, instead of forward to what may be, is the great weakener of self-confidence. This worry for the old past, this wasted energy for that which no power in the world can restore, ever lessens the individual's faith in himself, weakens his effort to develop himself for the future to the perfection of his possibilities. Nature, in her beautiful love and tenderness, says to man, weaken and worn and weary with the struggle, doing the best way you can the travel that is under your hand at this moment. Do it in the best period of preparation. For the future, your thought suggests. Bring all the light of knowledge from all the past to age. Do this, and you have done your best. The past is forever close to you. It is close forever to you. No worry, no trouble, no suffering, no agony of despair can alter it. It is as much as It is as much beyond your power as if it were a million years of eternity behind you. Turn all that past with its sad hours, weakness, and sin, its wasted opportunities as light, in confidence and hope upon the future. Turn it all in fuller truth and light so as to make each trifle of life, each trifle of this present and pardon me, turn it all in fuller truth and light so as to make each trifle of this present a new past that will be joy to look back to. Each trifle a grander, nobler, more perfect preparation for the future. The present and the future you can make from it is yours. The past has gone back with all its masters, all its history, all its records to the God who loaned you the golden moments to use in obedience to His law. Okay, last chapter, chapter number 16, which is the royal road to happiness. During my whole life, I have not had 24 hours of happiness. So said Prince Bismarck, one of the greatest statesmen of the 19th century. 83 years of wealth, fame, honors, power, influence, prosperity, and triumph. Years when he held an empire in his fingers, but not one day of happiness. What's the name of Prince Bismarck? Prince Bismarck. Years when he held an empire in his fingers, but not one day of happiness. Happiness is the greatest paradox in nature. It can grow in any soil, live under any conditions. It defies environment. It comes from within. It is the revelation of the depths of the inner life as light and heat proclaim the sun from which they radiate. Happiness consists not of having, but of being. Not of possessing, but of enjoying. It is the warm glow of a heart at peace with itself. A martyr at the stake may have happiness that a king on his throne might envy. Man is the creator of his own happiness. Is the aroma of a life lived in harmony with high ideals. For what a man has, he may be dependent on others, but he is rest with him alone. What he is, rest with him alone. What he obtains in life is what acquisition. What he attains is growth. Happiness is the soul's joy in the possession of the intangible. Absolute, perfect, continuous happiness in life is impossible for the human. It would mean the consummation of attainments, the individual consciousness of a perfectly fulfilled destiny. Happiness is the paradoxic. Pardon me. Happiness is paradoxic because it may coexist with trial, sorrow, and poverty. It is the gladness of the heart rising superior to all conditions. Happiness has a number of understudies: gratification, satisfaction, content, and pleasure. Clever imitator that simulate its appearance rather than emulate its method. Gratification is a harmony between our desires and our possessions. It is our incomplete. It is the thankful acceptance of art. It is a mental pleasure in the quality of what one receives, and unsatisfiedness as to the quantity. It may be an element in happiness, but in itself, it is not happiness. Satisfaction is perfect identity of our desires and our possessions. It exists only so long as this perfect union and unity can be preserved. But every realized ideal gives birth to new ideals. Every step in advance reveals large domains of the unattained. Every feeding stimulates new appetites. then the desires and possessions are no longer identical, no longer equal. New cravings call forth new activities. The equipoise is destroyed, and dissatisfaction re enters. Man might possess everything tangible in the world and yet not be happy, for happiness is the satisfying of the soul, not of the mind or the body. Dissatisfaction, in its highest sense, is the keynote of all advance, the evidence of new aspirations, the guarantee of the progressive revelation of new possibilities. Content is a greatly overrated virtue. It is a kind of diluted despair. It is the feeling with which we continue to accept substitutes without striving for the realities. Content makes the trained individual swallow vinegar and try to smack his lips as if it were mine. Pardon me, as if it were wine. Wine. Content enables one to warm his hands at the fire of a past joy that exists only in memory. Content is a mental and moral chloroform that deadens the activities of the individual to rise to higher planes of life and growth. Man should never be contented with anything less than the best efforts of his nature can possibly secure for him. Content makes the world more comfortable for the individual, but it is the death knell of progress. Man should be content with each step of progress merely as a station, discontented with it as a destination. Contented with it as a step, discontented with it as a finality. There are times when a man should be content with what he has, but never with what he is. What is discontent? This. Okay. Fulfillment. Mental fulfillment. There are times when a man should be content with what he has, but never with what he is. But content is not happiness. Neither is pleasure. Pleasure is temporary. Happiness is continuous. Pleasure is a note. Happiness is a symphony. Pleasure may exist when conscience utters protests. Happiness? Never. Pleasure may have its dregs and its lees, but none can be found in the cup of happiness. Man is the only animal that can be really happy. To the rest of the creation belong only weak imitations of the understandings. Happiness represents a peaceful attunement of a life with a standard of living. It can never be made by the individual, by himself, for himself. It is one of the incidental byproducts of unselfish life. No man can make his own happiness the one object of his life and attain it, any more than he can jump on the far end of the shadow. If you would hit the bull's eye of happiness and the target of life, aim above it. Place other things higher than your own happiness, and it will surely come to you. You can buy pleasure. You can acquire content. You can become satisfied. Nature never put real happiness on the bargain counter. It is under the detachable accompaniment. It is under, pardon me again. It is the undetachable accompaniment of the true living. True living. Pardon me again. It is the undetachable accompaniment of true living. This is it. It is calm and peaceful. It never lives in an atmosphere of worry or of hopeless struggle. The basis of happiness is the love of something outside self. Search every instant of happiness in the world, and you will find that all the incidental features are eliminated. There is always the constant, unchangeable element of love. Love of parent for child, love of man and woman for each other, love of humanity in some form, or a great life work into which the individual throws all his energies. Happiness is the voice of optimism, of faith, of simple, steadfast love. No cynic or pessimist can be really happy. A cynic is a man who's morally nearsighted. Cynic, a person who believes that people only do things for themselves rather than to help others. Okay. A cynic is a man who's morally nearsighted and brags about it. He sees the evil in his own heart and thinks he sees the world. He lets a note in his eye eclipse the sun. An incurable cynic is an individual who should long for death. For life cannot bring him happiness. Death might. The keynote of Bismarck's lack of happiness was his profound distrust of human nature. There is a royal road to happiness. It lies in concentration, conquest, and conscience. What is consurrection? The act of making or declaring something holy or setting it apart for a sacred special purpose. Consurrection is dedicating the individual life to the service of others, to some noble mission, to realizing some unselfish ideal. Life is not something to be lived through. It is something to be lived up to. It is a privilege, not a penal servitude of so many decades on earth. Consurrection places the object of life above the mere acquisition of money as a finality. The man who is unselfish, kind, loving, tender, helpful, ready to lighten the burden of those around him, to harden the struggling ones, and to forget himself sometimes and remembering others, is on the right road to happiness. Consurrection is ever active, bold, and aggressive, fearing not but possible disloyalty to high ideals. Concentration makes the individual life simpler and deeper. It cuts away the shams and pretenses of modern living and limits life to its truest essentials. Worry, fear, useless regret, all the great wastes that sap mental, moral, or physical energy must be sacrificed, or the individual needlessly destroys half the possibilities of living. A great purpose in life, something that unifies the strengths and threads of each day's thinking, something that takes the sting from the petty trials, sorrows, sufferings, and burdens of life, is a great aid to concentration. Soldiers in battle may forget their wounds or even be unconscious of them in the inspiration of battling for what they believe is right. Concentration dignifies and humble life. It makes a great life sublime. In morals, it is a cut short of simplicity. It leads to right for right's sake. Without thought of policy or of reward, it brings calm and rest to the individual, a serenity that is but the sunlight of happiness. Conquest is the overcoming of an evil habit, the rising superior to opposition and attack, the spiritual exhalation that comes from resisting the invisible enemy. that comes from the resistance of invasion. Pardon me, again, that comes from resisting the invasion of the growling material side of life. Sometimes, when you're worn or weak with the struggle, when it seems that justice is a dream, that honesty and loyalty, truth, count for nothing, that the devil is the only good paymaster, when hope grows dim, flicker, that is the time you must tower in the great sublime faith that right must prevail. Then you must throttle these imps of doubt and despair. You must master yourself to master the world around you. This is conquest. This is what counts. Even a log can float with the current. It takes a man to fight sturdily against the opposing tide that would sweep his craft out of its course. When the jealousies, the petty intrigues, and meannesses, and the misunderstandings life assail you, rise above them. Be like a lighthouse that illumines and beautifies the snarling, swashing waves of the storm that fled amid, that seek to undermine it and seek to wash over it. This is conquest. When a chance to win fame, wealth, success, or the attainment of your heart's desire by sacrifice of honor or principle comes to you, and it does not affect you long enough even to seem a temptation. You've been the victor. That too is conquest. Conquest is part of the royal road to happiness. Concise as the mentor, the guide and compass of every act leads ever to happiness. When the individual can stay alone with his conscience and get his approval without using force or specialist logic, then he begins to know what real happiness is. But the individual must be careful that he is not appealing to a conscience perverted or deadened by the wrongdoing and consequent deedness of its own. The man who is honestly seeking to live his life in constant concentration, conquest, living from day to day as less as he can, but the light he has may rely implicitly on his conscience. He can shut his ears to what the world says and find in the approval of his own conscience the highest earthly tribune, the voice of the infinite communing with the individual. Unhappiness is the hunger to get. Happiness is the hunger to give. True happiness must ever have the tint of sorrow outlived, the sense of pain softened by the mellowing years, the chastening of laws. That is the wondrous mystery of time, transmutes our suffering into love and sympathy with others. If the individual should set out for a single day to give happiness, to make life happier, brighter, and sweeter, not for himself but for others, he would find a wondrous revelation of what happiness really is. The greatest of world's heroes did not by any series of acts of heroism do as much real good as any individual living his whole life in seeking from day to day to make others happy. Each day there should be fresh resolution, new strength, renewed enthusiasm. Just for today might be the daily motto of thousands of societies through the country, composed of members bound together to make the world better through constant simple acts of kindness, constant deeds of sweetness and love. And happiness would come to them in its highest and best form, not because they would seek to absorb it, but because they seek to radiate it. Okay, this book has ended nearly 1 hour in its last phase. Tomorrow we will come with a new book. Till then, I'll take a leave.